It's been 20 years now that we've been robotically repeating the mission of the United Methodist Church is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world, and we haven't been doing it real well. Truth is, about 4 out of 5 churches are not consistently and frequently making disciples, and that may be why you're here. Good on you. That's great. I suppose the good news side of that is in a culture, in a setting, in a time when it seems difficult, 1 in 5 churches is consistently and frequently making disciples of Jesus Christ. We've gone to workshops and read books. I'd love to calculate how many books have been read by the people in this room about how to make disciples. And we've gone to conferences pretty far away, and I've loved some of them, Church of the Resurrection, good stuff. But man, I go out to Church of the Resurrection and watch those, them talk about their discipleship plan and then like begin to scale it down from their 16,000 to the 600 or the 100 or the 60 that are in a particular church. And it's a whole different thing. About a year ago, there's a group of people sitting in a room, mostly from churches that were consistently and frequently making disciples, and talking about how might we share this? And this is the result of that. If you came for a plan like fold A into B, insert C, unfold, and you have a discipleship plan, you're probably going to be disappointed. I don't think we can do it that way. If we ever could, we can't now. And so what we hope today is that you'll get some ideas. There'll be something that stimulates your head, that touches your heart, that gives you some traction, that you might begin to get going on developing a plan that's the right plan for your church in the place where God planted you. Not for Church of the Resurrection, not for Crosspoint, not for Carlisle, but for you. That's the first goal. The second goal is that sometime during this day you begin to make some connections, to build some networks, to make a new friend, meet an old one, and realize that, hey, they did the same thing last year that we need to do next year, or vice versa, or we're working kind of at the same place. My hope is that this will be the real kind of connectionalism, an organic connectionalism, not an institutional weighted connectionalism, but the kind of connection that will help you after today. Our idea of keynotes was to present somebody who kind of had a pretty big plan in place. I mean, they've been working on it for a while, and it's pretty comprehensive. And so we've asked Crosspoint, our host church, to give us something of their plan. We won't hear it all. There are a couple of workshops that relate to it. Dave, I think, is going to at least get us started on that, if not be the primary presenter. Crosspoint Church has been here for a while. This was a church plant when suburbs were new. I mean, they got it right. They saw a suburb starting, and so they built a church. And it grew like crazy. And then it began to have some obstacles. And it's a demographic story, really, but it's a story that's been repeated in many places. They've looked at it a different way, and I don't know if it's part of their discipleship plan exactly, but it probably relates to it. One of the things they've done is realize they need to be in more places and more spaces. And so they've gone to a multi-site model, 3 in place, and it's announced, right? So a 4th one being born, and that's just a different way of doing it. And if we don't get deep into that and you want to hear about that, talk to Dave sometime again. He'd love to talk to you. Dave?
So you're here to consider what discipleship is going to look like at your church. And I don't know if you're a member of the congregation. I don't know if you're pastoral leadership. I don't know if you're in a leadership role. But I just wanted to, you've already had a busy day, and I recognize that. Of course, you know what they say about people who are busy? Those are the people you go to if you want something done, right? Go find the people who are already busy, because those are the people who will get something done. And so you're here because God has asked you to get something done, and probably because you're busy. And so I just want to thank you for being here. And I can't stress that enough. This is outside the box, and I was part of that team that Pastor Dennis was talking about when he said there was a team of people who got together and talked about discipleship, and this came out of that conversation. And I love the fact that sometimes when you sit around the table and you talk about something, I love the fact that when it actually becomes a reality. And this became a reality for us. And so It's great that you're here. The labor of the church is ours together. And it's not designated to those who are called to be separate as pastoral leaders. And so we work together side by side, and we work together because we're all called. And you're here today because of a calling in your life. And so I believe God wants to do something. I'm excited about what the potential is from the people who are in this room today. The potential, not just in our conference, I'm talking about kingdom potential. I think sometimes we get really wrapped up in just what it looks like to be United Methodist. I think that's actually the first time I mentioned our denomination all day so far, because I'm really not sure that's what it's all about. I think there's a structure that keeps us together, and I love being UMC, don't get me wrong. Because being part of this has made all the difference in my life and in the life of the places and people I meet around the world. The first time I really thought about being connectional was when there was a hurricane that went through the midsection of Orlando. I was the youth pastor here at the time, and so I called up the Florida annual conference, and I said, is there a place where we can come down and just sleep on the floor and help rebuild with our youth group? And so they put me in connection with the person who's in Orlando from the board of discipleship from New York City, we actually have a missionary in Orlando. I know some of you are thinking that's a job you want, right? But we have a missionary in Orlando, and they hooked me up with this missionary in Orlando, and for 5 years straight, we went back into that town and worked on roofs and on houses doing repair. And it was all because I had a connection. What gets really awesome is I remember not long ago talking with one of our denominational leaders in mission and talking with somebody who's a part of our congregation who had just gotten back from Sierra Leone, West Africa. And he said, Dave, we got to do something about what's going on in West Africa. And so I got on a plane with a group of people, and I flew over to see what was going on firsthand. And it's made all the difference in the world, and it's because of that connection that we have, right? So we are connected, but the caution sometimes is that we just become way too tribal. We become, that it's all about us and the way we do things. And I'm just going to tell you right off the bat, and I say all this to not as an apology, but just to say this is where we're coming from. I have done a lot of work inside and outside of the United Methodist Church looking at discipleship, and I find a whole lot more outside than inside. Now, that's our fault. That's our fault. And I'm so glad you're here, because my sense is you want to correct that. Because what's happening in the world today means that we need a discipleship process that's going to be a whole lot better than it is right now. So here's what I want to do. I want to talk to you about what discipleship should look like. And because here's what happens for most of us. Most of us look at our churches and we get used to what our churches look like. Some of you pastors this morning, you knew exactly who was in your congregation because when you looked out, there were bodies in certain places, right? The pastors in the room are going, yeah, you can kind of close your eyes, and you get that negative image in your eyes when you close your eyes, and you can close your eyes and you can look out the congregation through those closed eyes, and you go, okay, Jane was here, and Bob was here, and because you know where everybody sits, and so your neurons just start firing that way, right? Every time you look at the situation, you see pretty much the same thing, and the danger of that in discipleship is that we will miss something. It's easy to miss something you're not looking for, right? You see, I think that's what happens to us in the United Methodist Church and in any denominational structure is that we start missing the things that are right in front of us because we get really caught up in doing what we do, right? I mean, most of us get caught up in the busyness of making sure we got programs ready for the weekend, making sure we have songs picked out, making sure we rehearse, making sure we spend time doing our sermons, visiting people in the hospital, all that kind of stuff. And what the caution that happens into each one of our lives should be is this. We could miss something because in that look out to the congregation, there might be somebody who's sitting out there that has never been in your church before. And when you look out, you can pretty much figure who's here today, right? But all of a sudden, there's just that one person. And if you're not cautious, if you're not observant, you will miss that one person who just kind of walks in and walks back out of your congregation, just like the bear did, right? Some of you have seen that before, so you knew to look for the bear. But this is called inattentional blindness. It's not something we do because we mean to. It's because our neurons are used to firing in a certain way, and we get used to them firing that way. And I believe what's beginning to happen for most of us is that there is a shift beginning to happen. that we've moved away from just making sure that people show up on a Sunday morning, and we've moved into a place of making sure that people fall in love with Jesus Christ again. Now, I want to just say that again because I didn't get the reaction I thought I was going to get. We need to move away from just opening the doors on Sunday morning, making sure that people show up on a Sunday morning, and helping people fall in love with Jesus Christ again. Because last time I checked, that's what we're supposed to be about. But the caution for all of us is that we really get caught up in making sure that we got enough people sitting in the seats on Sunday morning so that we can have our paychecks written out on Thursday afternoon. Let's just be honest. There are times when it gets that raw in some of our churches. So what does it mean to be a part of a congregation that starts taking a look at who are we going to be in 2017? Because the reality is that what you have in store for the rest of 2016 probably is already done. You've already probably got this year down pat, right? So let's look at what next year can look like. What's the possibility if we want to reach a generation that looks just similarly enough to us, yet thinks completely differently than what we think like? Because you see, there is a generation in the world right now who doesn't think like you if you've grown up in a church. For me, that means that I can no longer afford to look at the world by myself. I can't do it alone. I've got to start having people beside me looking at the world with me. And I've got to start being willing to see the world through somebody else's eyes. If you're doing ministry alone, it's time to stop. It's time to start making sure that you've got somebody alongside of you who's doing ministry with you. And that might mean changing your schedule a bit. Might mean changing how you live out your week, how you structure things. But it means for each one of us that we cannot keep doing ministry the way we used to do it, thinking that we're going to engage a world that looks very different than it looked in 1950 or 1960 or 1970 or 1980 or 1990. I grew up in the 60s as a kid. Graduated high school in 1979. Do the math, you can figure out how old I am. But I never had to ask on Saturday night what we were doing tomorrow morning. I never had to ask my parents on Saturday night, what kind of clothes do I need to lay out tonight? Because I don't know, what are we doing tomorrow morning? Are we doing soccer? Are we doing baseball? Are we doing football? What are we doing tomorrow morning? I never had to ask that question on Saturday night when I was growing up. Now, there were some community standards in place. There were blue laws, right? Remember blue laws? Right. And there were not a whole lot of things happening on television on Sunday morning. At least not that I wanted to watch. It wasn't anything like Saturday morning, right? Because when I grew up on Saturday mornings, it was a bowl of cereal in front of the TV with Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and the Roadrunner, right? But Sunday morning, none of that stuff was on Sunday morning. So I had some friends at the church, and so my parents, I knew where I was going to be. I was going to hang out with my friends at church on Sunday morning. That was just the way it was. I knew Sunday afternoon we were going to Grandma's house for lunch, right? But the world is in a different place this morning when you open the doors to the church where you're at. The world was in a completely different place. And so we need to start moving into a place where those of us, especially those of us who grew up in the church, and I don't know how many of you in this room that means affects you, probably a lot of you. But it means we need to start seeing the church through a different set of eyes. And we need to start seeing the church in a completely different way because we cannot do this alone. And so, contrary to popular belief of the man behind the curtain, that guy, because sometimes doesn't it feel like that when you're a pastor? How many pastors in the room felt like all you were doing this morning was just pulling levers and making things happen so that there would be a big image up on the front, somehow, somewhere, so that you could affect somebody's life? I can't do ministry like that anymore. We can't do ministry like that anymore. We can't do this alone. Think about it for a moment. How many people did it take? How many people did it take for that last surgery that you heard about, or maybe that last surgery you went through? Right? How many people did it take? Did it take the surgeon alone? No. There was a surgeon, there were the RNs, there was an anesthesiologist, there was the hospital or surgery center admission people, there were the techs, the med techs, the maintenance people who keep the building running, there was a custodian who cleaned the room so that it would be ready for you, right? A surgery is a place where you do not want a one-man show. You don't want the physician in there mopping the floor right before the surgery, right? It's not what we want. How about the Olympics this summer? Did you watch the Olympics this summer? Wasn't that fun? Do you know how many people it took to make the Olympics happen? There were referees, schedulers, there were laundry people washing all those towels that we saw people were using, right? There were people who set up the venues, tore down the venues, people who were selling tickets, taking tickets, television crews, broadcast people. There was a guy who rakes the sand at the volleyball court. Don't you want to be him? Right? Somebody making sure the water is blue, not green. It was said on the internet that it took about 70,000 people to make the Olympics happen. 70,000. How about the last concert you went to? Did you know there were hundreds of people running behind the scenes so that concert could happen? There were people running wires, setting out T-shirts, selling tickets, driving the tour bus, running sound, running lights. How about the last movie you watched? Have you stayed and watched through the credits of the last movie you watched? The last movie I watched was Medea, Boo. Have you watched the movie credits and how many people it takes to pull a movie off? Seems like hundreds of people. Editing, producing, managing. How about a presidential election? We're in the middle of one of those. How many people does it take to run a presidential election, a candidacy? It takes hundreds of people. It takes over 100 people to make the Harrisburg Senators game a reality, as well as the Hershey Bears. It takes 22,000 people over the course of the summer to run Hershey Park and make it happen. And listen to this number. It takes 75,000 people every day to make Walt Disney World work. 75,000 people. These are places where you do not want it to be a one-man show, right? So why do we think it's okay for our churches to be myopic in that respect? To think that we can just focus in, settle down, and think that it's okay for just one or two people to run the show. And it's time, which is the reason I'm so excited, it's time for all of us to get on board with the idea of discipleship, because all of us have to be a part of the process. So I just want you to look around to somebody in the room, and I want you to say something to them. I want you to just look at somebody and say, it's going to take you. Just turn to somebody and say that to them. It's going to take you. I want you to be very pinpointed about it. It's going to take you. Right? Now that you've been convicted, let's talk about it. Because it's going to take a faith community to happen in your church that's going to take people from the moment they walk in the door to a place where they're plugged in, not to you as a church, but to Jesus Christ. Because it's obvious that people are searching for something. They're hungering for something. And all of us are looking for some kind of satisfaction that only faith can fill. I'm thoroughly convinced of that. And so when people walk in the door of your church, here's what we know is different. Here's what we know is different from the years in past. If people walk into the doors of your church on a Sunday morning, most likely they've walked in because something has happened to them. And they need answers. They need to know what to do about whatever event has just taken place. It could have been a miscarriage. It could have been a marriage that broke up. It could have been a pink slip in the check on Friday. And they thought, you know what, I need some answers, and I don't know where to go, but people have told me that church there, maybe they have answers. Most people are not getting up on Sunday morning and saying, well, what am I going to do today? Oh, church, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Until something happens. Which means people are walking into your congregation on a Sunday morning, and in some respects and in some fashion, they've been devastated in their lives. And what we say to them and how we process them into a place where they can get to know Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior is incredibly important for us, because in the past, we just took that for granted because we used to open the doors on Sunday morning and people would show up. Right? And by and large, most of us, when we showed up, we were okay, or at least we put on a pretty good front. The truth is, people aren't okay. And they need to find a process that they can step into. The longing that people need for Jesus Christ is probably more powerful today than it's ever been. And we need to have a way for people to step into a process of getting to know Jesus Christ. Because the daily grind and the difficulties of life will leave us empty, searching for something that can fill us, that I believe is a God-sized hole, right? That only God can fill. And winging it and thinking that, well, we'll see what happens. If somebody walks in, we'll do something. I've heard that at churches. Well, we really don't get a whole lot of visitors, but if somebody walks in, we'll do something. Do you have a plan? Discipleship means having a plan. And it's going to take more than just a catchy mission statement or some really neat vision statement that you have on paper that most people in your church have no idea what it means or what it says. It's going to take more than that. And I know the denomination has had a mission statement that's been around for a long time, and Dennis quoted it for you. Most of you can quote it as well. But my question is, what's your personal church's mission statement where you're at right now? And does it have anything to do with making disciples for Jesus Christ? Does it have anything to do with taking somebody and walking alongside them so that they're getting themselves to the place where they're in front of God and the throne of God, so that they can have a relationship with an almighty God who loves them, cares about them, and sent his son to die for them? Or is it about just making sure that we have more volunteers in our nursery on Sunday morning? Because I think the world is a little bit afraid when we become evangelistic, and they're just a little afraid that really the only reason we want them there is because we have a vacancy in some position in our church, and we just need people to fill the vacancies. So, what are we going to do? I mean, let's admit that the world around us is different. And it's time for us to approach life a bit differently. We can't keep doing the same things thinking we're going to get different results. Definition of insanity, right? So, let me throw up a caution sign before I go any further. Discipleship, I think, has probably become the latest buzzword in the Christian world. You can find more books, more YouTube videos, umpteen conferences, as Dennis already pointed out. I would imagine many of you in this room have read at least one or two books. You know at least one or two important people in the area of discipleship. If nothing else, you've probably heard of Andy Stanley. And you know that discipleship has kind of become the thing. And the caution is that we'll simply enter into this latest buzz just far enough to get our feet wet, but not fully engaged, so much so that it actually causes change in our personal lives and in the life of our congregations. Because this is going to take radical change. You can't keep doing the same thing the same way, thinking you're going to get different results. It's going to mean change. Now, I know that there are about a third of the room, statistically, that just checked out on me. Some of you are smiling because you're still with me, and the others are not smiling because you're the ones who just checked out. Right? But my faith and hope is that you're here because you want to do something different. And that means we're going to need to do something different. Right? And it can't be about us. It can't be about who we are as a church. It can't be about our paychecks. It can't be about the seats that we have. And it's got to be about the kingdom. It's got to be about the bigger picture. If it's just about us, then let's just close the doors and forget this. Because that just doesn't make sense when it comes to this book. Because last time I checked, everything I read in here means it's not about us. It's about giving our lives away in such a way that somebody else gets to know Jesus, like we know Jesus. And so what are we doing to make that happen? It's going to need to be a church-wide effort. It's going to take every single person in your congregation. It's going to take every single person learning about what it means to be a disciple and then being willing to share that with somebody else. On a Sunday morning, on a Friday night, on a Wednesday afternoon, doesn't matter. So I'm going to give you just a couple things that you can focus in on and zoom in on real quickly. First thing I think is really important. Okay, let me just say this. Prayer. Make prayer the number one priority for your discipleship movement at your church. Because that's what this is, right? We're talking about a movement. We're talking about something where we're moving everybody within your congregation to this new place where they understand discipleship at a whole new level. And so if we're going to do that, we need to surround this with prayer. We need people spending time in prayer. And I've already mentioned that there's dozens and dozens of materials on the market that you can use when it comes to discipleship. And every one of them will tell you to make prayer a priority. Now, here's what I want to say to you. I have done it both ways. We have done it both ways. I've done it both ways. I've been to those conferences where they say, before you do anything, make sure you go back to your church and develop a prayer team. And I went, oh, that's a great idea. And then I didn't do it. And then I've been to other conferences where they say, now before you do anything, go back to your church and develop a prayer team. And I've done that. And it made all the difference in the world. So please don't avoid this one. As a matter of fact, don't write any of the rest of them down if you don't think you can do this one. Because the rest of them aren't going to work. The rest of them aren't going to be fulfilled. I've been there. I've tried it. It doesn't work. It's got to be focused in a time of prayer that engages the entirety of the congregation. So let me just give you a quick example. 3 weeks ago, I was really struggling with what we were to do as a congregation as we were moving into a new place for us here and not only launching a fourth campus, but I truly do believe that our Colonial Park campus is really on the verge of something amazing, and I'm not sure what it is. And so I was talking with my wife, and who is the spiritual giant in our home. Think about that one for a moment. So I'm talking with my wife, and I said, I'm just really concerned. I've got this heavy burden on my heart about where our Colonial Park campus is going and what's going on in our Midtown campus, and I just feel like I need to do something, and I don't know what. I don't know whether I just need to have somebody come in and evaluate the congregation. I'm not sure what to do, but I know there's a breakthrough coming. And I could feel it. And I've talked to other people who are feeling this breakthrough that's getting ready to happen. And it means that we're going to reach a community and we're going to see more people coming to Jesus than ever before. And I just feel this. And I feel something amazing is about ready to happen. And my wife looked at me and she said, are we praying about this? And I said, we really should. That's a great idea. And she said, well, I think what I can do is join together with you in just a real focused time of prayer and fasting. And that's not something odd for us. 10 years ago, when I became the vision pastor for Crosspoint Church, I stepped into a time of prayer and fasting because my decision with God was I wanted to do this well. We had gone through some massive change at this campus, and we were getting ready to launch 2 new campuses. And I really wanted to have the focus be about God. And so I stepped into a time of prayer and fasting. And what that means for me is a focused time of fasting where I do a 24-hour fast, one 24-hour period every week. And so that means I eat supper one night and don't eat supper again until the next night. And that I just focus in on that time. For me, it's midweek. It's either Wednesday to Thursday or Tuesday to Wednesday or something like that, right? And I usually make it a really tight target so that I know it's going to be there every week. And I kind of quietly let the staff know that that's where it's at, so don't invite me to lunch. And I let Barb, my personal assistant, I let her know, just don't schedule breakfast or lunch meetings on that day, right? It's just important. And so the last time I did this, I stepped into it, and I knew that it was going to be for a season. It lasted for 5.5 years. And then God just released me from that. For some reason, God released me into a new phase and into a new place, and we've been in that new place for a while, but now I feel like God's leading us into a brand new place, and God's got something really great for us to come and to happen, not only at our Midtown campus, but at this campus. And so my wife and I decided 3 weeks ago to step into a time of dedicated prayer and fasting. Last Sunday, I walk out to this platform, and some of you can think this is crazy. And I'm okay with that because I'm pretty sure it's crazy. And you would just be affirming what I believe. But God said to me very clearly, tell everybody else to join you in the prayer and fasting. And I went, really? Yeah, really. So I finished up the message and I said, I need to shift gears with everybody here in the room for a moment. And I did that at all 3 of our services in this room last Sunday morning. And I said, I need to shift gears with you for a minute. I need to talk to you about what I believe God is doing and what God is ready to do among us. I believe God's ready to just move in our community, and He wants you to do it, but He needs us to be ready. He needs us to be prepared for what He wants to do. God needs to prepare us for what the kingdom can become if we step into being who God wants us to be, but we've got to prepare first. And so I'm telling you, for the last 2 weeks, I've been doing some prayer and fasting, and I don't know if you understand what fasting is, and I described what fasting is, and I said, so here's what God is asking me to do. God's asking me to tell you to step into a time of prayer fasting with me as a congregation. 24 hours, all week. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care what, it's between you and God how you step into this. But we're going to do this until the end of the month of November when we launch this campus. Now, it just also coincides that that's Thanksgiving, and I think that's just a neat way to end a fast, right? I had a man come up to me after one of our services, and he had this look on his face that was unusual. I didn't recognize the look on his face, and he said, I need to talk to you. So he pulls me aside out in the lobby out there, and he looks at me in the face, and he says, Dave, 2 weeks ago, I started fasting, and I didn't know why. Wow. There has not been a single movement in the history of Christianity that did not start without a dedicated time and group of people who committed to praying and fasting for what God wanted to see happen in your church. Please don't take this lightly. If you wrote down the word prayer and prayer teams and prayer and fasting, I want you to go back to your church and start making that happen. Now, if you're willing to do that, you can write down the other things I'm going to tell you. Okay? This comes with that kind of precursor, right? If you can't do that one, then maybe the other ones are not going to be as easy, but that one I don't want you to miss, because I've missed it in the past. I thought, oh yeah, it's no big deal. We can pull this off. I've got all it takes, all that kind of stuff. I've been there. I tried to do it under my own power, or we have tried to do it under our own power here. It just doesn't work. You know what I mean. Some of you have tried it too. So please take prayer seriously. Make it a priority. Take it to your folks on Sunday morning. Take it to every one of your groups, Sunday school classes, whatever it might be, and ask everyone to do a focused time in prayer as you begin to decide what you're going to do in the area of discipleship for the future in 2017. Okay? Sound good? Should I move on? Okay, good. I saw the nods. Thank you. Second thing, relationships are vital. Relationships in the area of discipleship are vital. You know this already. I'm not telling you something you don't already know. The fact of the matter is, Jesus calls every one of us to walk beside somebody else in our relationship building and our discipleship making. We are not to do this alone. You're to call somebody to come alongside of you. Pastors, when you go to the hospital, you should be calling somebody to go with you. I know it's a pain in the backside. I understand that. I know it means scheduling. I know it means work. I know it means waiting a little bit longer until somebody's available. But if we're ever going to take somebody into a next discipleship phase in their life, we've got to walk them into situations where we're walking with them hand in hand, side by side, but until we can get to that place where we can let our hand go and let them do it on their own. Are you with me? Does that make sense? And so we have to be purposeful about that. You cannot do this haphazardly. You have to make a decision to say, in our church, we're going to take relationships and make them an important part of who we are. That means our small group ministry or our Sunday school morning ministry means we're going to take those ministries and push them into a place where people are actually truly caring about each other. They're loving each other. They're in relationship with each other that's deep and powerful and meaningful. That can happen on a Sunday morning in a class setting, and it can happen on a Monday night in a small group setting. It doesn't matter. If you're not in small group ministry right now, I would encourage you to consider it. And if you're not, and Sunday morning, Sunday school is your gig, then please, if you're a pastor or a congregational leader, walk into those groups and say, look, here's what we want to do. We want to take discipleship to the next level, but it means that we can no longer just sit in rows and listen to someone teaching on a video screen. We've got to start sitting in circles and start being in a relationship with each other. Maybe we turn the TV off, or maybe the leader stops talking so much. And we just talk about life with each other and what life looks like. I'm in a small group that meets every Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. at a local restaurant. It's a group of guys, there's 7 of us, and we've been meeting for a couple years. Some of you are like, 6 a.m.? That's what I said too. But all these guys needed to be, at work at 7:30, and so we needed to be able to wrap up somewhere between 7 and 7:15 so they could all get in their cars and go to work. And it gave me a super start to a day, right? It gave me a great way to kick off my Tuesdays. Tuesdays around here are meeting days. So we do marathons. We do all of our meetings. Our executive team meets. Our our campus pastors meet, our teaching team meets, our staff from just this campus meets later in the day, and then that night usually we do trustees or staff parish or church council or something crazy, right? So Tuesdays are meeting day. It's a great day for me to start my day. Because you see, starting my day with my group is so powerful for me. I get to sit down with a group of guys who know me really well. They don't know me as well as my wife, but it's pretty close some days. And they get to know me so well that they can call me out on stuff, and I can do the same with them. And we can challenge each other to truly ratchet up our lives, constantly developing ourselves into people who are following Jesus better today than we were yesterday. And I need that. We all need that. So pastors, if you're not in a small group, I would encourage you to lead the way. Because I understand that you're busy. I understand that it's crazy some days, but you need to have that nourishment happening in your own life. So, and you also need to be able to speak about it from up front on a Sunday morning. Because you can't tell somebody it's vital if you're not doing it yourself. I'm going to repeat that. You can't tell somebody it's really important if you're not doing it yourself. Because it doesn't seem important if you're not willing to step into it yourself as a pastor, right? So pastors, leaders in congregations, please, I'm just going to encourage you, if you're not in a small group, if you're not meeting with some people who have a great relationship with you, so much so that they can peel back all the layers and really get into who you are alongside of you, it's time for that to start. Those relationships around here start from the elementary age and go all the way up. We believe those relationships start very, very early. And we do a lot of study when it comes to child development and that kind of stuff, and so we understand that kids get it. Kids understand what it's like to be in relationship with each other, and we teach that very early on. We also use a curriculum called Orange. Came out of North Point Church down in Atlanta, Andy Stanley again. And the Orange curriculum really supports that kind of work for us. So that's important. Our youth ministry also functions in that very same way. Our youth ministry is small group, cell group generated. And, those of you who are going out to the breakouts on elementary or kids ministry and youth ministry here, you'll hear more about that. All right, so relationships are vital, right? But prayers first, right? Relationships are vital. Number 3, you've got to celebrate the successes. You've got to be a congregation that's willing to put up front what you believe needs to be the things that you're going to want people to do. There's a comment out there, a statement out there that says, you replicate what you celebrate, right? You replicate what you celebrate. And so if you're never celebrating anything, if you're never saying, this is what it looks like to be a disciple, by having people come up front on a Sunday morning and saying, no, this is great. This morning I did it. We're blessed at this campus. We have 107 people involved in hospitality ministries. There are 107 people of a congregation averages around 400. 100 of those people are involved in hospitality teams. That's 25% of our congregation. That's crazy. I still don't believe it. I see the list that sits on my desk. I'm still not sure that's true, right? It's like, that's insane. What church has 25% of its congregation directly involved in a hospitality ministry, right? Now, some of those people are also involved in lots of other ministries, but they committed to signing up and being a part of one of our hospitality teams. I just think that's outrageous, and I mentioned that this morning, and I had everybody just applaud that. Well, the people who are not on hospitality teams, you know what they heard? It must be really important around here to be on a hospitality team. Done. Right? I'm going to replicate by celebrating. And I celebrated the fact that we have 107 people in hospitality ministries, and we applauded that this morning. We celebrate all of our baptisms. We have huge days, and we separate them out. We do our baptisms on special days. We set them apart. And that's, for some of you, that means you got to throw out the lectionary. Sorry. But throw it out for at least 1 or 2 Sundays a year. Plan something out far enough in advance. I know this hurts for some of us who like to put together a sermon on Friday or Saturday. We plan a year out in advance, by the way. Our 2017 is just about in the bag. And in the course of 2017, we have several dates that are celebration dates. And we do our baptisms and our new members on those days. Our next one coming up is November the 20th. The Sunday right before Thanksgiving, right? So for us, that's in between two of our series. We end one series, do a special weekend, and then start our next series, which in places outside of Crosspoint, they call it Advent, right? We don't use a lot of those kind of churchy terms, but that's... So we're using November 20th as a day to celebrate family, celebrate baptisms, celebrate people who are new members. I don't have a whole lot of a sermon that morning because the people become the sermon, right? And their testimony and their witness and what they have to say and stepping in and becoming new members, that's what it looks like to be the church. And I want to celebrate that. I want to take a morning and say, this is it right here. You see this? There's adults and families stepping into baptism. There are children stepping into baptism. Every summer we do one of our baptism services, we do a full immersion at either a local swimming pool or somewhere like that. And we take people, I love dunking people. It is awesome. It's boom, here we go. Because there's nothing like it, man. I mean, and here's the thing, if you're like, well, I've never done that. Well, it might be because you're not seeing adults come to faith in Jesus Christ. Because adults will come to you and say, well, I want to be baptized, and I want that whole, like go under the water thing. That's how they'll describe it, by the way. I want to do that whole under the water thing. And I'm like, yeah, cool. We got one of those every summer. Can you wait till then? And they're like, yeah. And if they can't wait till then, we'll do it here in the front of the church. And I have a towel, and I say, you're going to get wet. I don't do a whole lot of sprinkling. People get wet. We celebrate that. We celebrate the fact that people have made a decision to become new members. Here's what I know. 95% of the persons who become members of our congregation are already involved in a ministry. 95% of the people who become members of our church are already involved in a ministry. They've already identified a place where they can serve, and they are already serving somewhere. And then they make a decision like, wow, this church must really be cool. Maybe I should become a member. Now, some of our ministries actually say that within a year we want you to become a member. So if you're teaching here, if you're one of our teaching staff, we ask you to become a member within a year of your starting to teach. But we don't tell you you have to be a member to start. You get it? Does that make sense? Some of us, you see, we put the hurdles out front. We actually put the hurdle a little bit down the track and let you build some steam before you make that first jump of becoming a new member. And so we let you just run for a while alongside of somebody who's already doing it. And so we'll put you in a classroom with somebody. And that way you can start learning, and maybe that person says, next Sunday I'm on vacation, it's all yours, have at it. I think you're ready. Right? Isn't that cool? I just believe that's the way to do it, so that by the time they stand up here to become a new member, half of the people in the congregation have had engagement somewhere in that person's life already. Maybe they've been on a hospitality team and they've seen them on Sunday morning. Or maybe their kids are being taught by that person and they're dropping them off every Sunday morning in one of our classrooms. And so that's, to me, that's just, it's doing things different, right? I think Jesus talked to people on a hillside in Israel one year. And there were thousands of them last time I checked. And he said, look, blessed isn't going to look like you think it looks. Being blessed is going to mean being poor instead of being rich. Being blessed means being meek. And he kind of turned the world upside down, and I think he's really still doing that. And I think he'd love to do it again in your church if you're willing. So, start celebrating the things you want to replicate. Next thing I want to tell you, I've got two more. This one and one more. Make it simple. Make it simple. Whatever structure you develop, make sure that people can understand it and it's simple enough to step into. I'm not necessarily saying, listen, I'm not saying make it easy. And so write that down. Put the word easy and draw a circle around it with a line through it. All right? Whatever it takes for you to understand it doesn't have to be easy, but it does need to be simplistic in its nature. Here's what I know. For some of our churches, it would take a seminary degree or an engineering degree or a management degree or all three of them to figure out how to become a disciple in your church. Because it's so complicated. Now, there's nothing wrong with an in-depth plan that challenges people to grow in their faith. Nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, I would say that's the only way to do it. But let me say something. One of the scariest moments in many of your lives was when you went off to college, right? Or maybe you sent a child off to college. And what do colleges do to help you process the next 4 years of your life? They give you a guide, don't they? And they say, your first year, here's the classes you can take, right? Your first semester, here's just some introductory classes you can take. For us, it's alpha. So here's the introductory steps you can take. Here's the first places you can go if you've never been a Christian before. Here's the first places you can step into, just like a college plan. And so the next step, what do I do next? Well, we've got a next step for you. And just like a college plan says, once you finish these courses and you're on your way to this major, here's the next step for you to take. And you can look at the guidebook or you can pull it up online, right? Grab it on your phone and you can scroll through and say, well, next semester I'm going to need to take these classes. That's important. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It's still going to be hard work to take those classes, right? But it means I can figure it out. It should be that easy for us when it comes to helping people step into a discipleship plan. If colleges can do it, we can do it. Because all we're asking is for you to scale it down. Lastly, it's important to look at everything you do. Everything you do. Everything is a discipleship opportunity. Everything you do is a discipleship opportunity. That means Sunday morning should have a discipleship focus. Sermons, all of your advertising, the pastor living it out by talking about their own journey. All of this is a part of the discipleship plan. Your board meetings should be a part of your discipleship plan. Everything you do. Now, it's not impossible to do this and follow the lectionary, but it's much easier. It's much easier if you're willing on occasion to at least step off of that if that's the plan you use. If you're currently using a lectionary plan. It's much easier if once in a while you can look at weekends and look at complete. Here's what I mean by that. Every once in a while here, 3 times a year we do what's called a Vision Sunday. We just throw everything out and we just focus on, here's our vision, here's where we're at, here's where we're going, here's what we're going to do. Here's why we're going to do it. And we just talk about it. We just talk openly about all the things that are going on here at Crosspoint Church. I think it's important to do that once in a while. It means we have to, whatever plan it is, we have to make room in the plan to do those kinds of Sunday mornings. And it might mean that you need to do that as well. You see, it's real easy to get caught up in just doing things the way we've always done it. But you've got to do this on purpose. That means you have to develop a plan. It means that everything you do is going to be an opportunity for people to get to know Jesus Christ and become a disciple of His. Everything you do. All right, so we've got prayer, focus on relationships, celebrate what's working, and and moving into a deeper level. Make it simple to understand and get plugged in, and make it systematic to your entire organization. Right? Did you get that? All right, so one last thing I want to say to you. You have to be willing to do something that I believe has probably been the most difficult thing I've had to do as a pastoral leader. You have to be willing to go to the congregation and say, we can no longer do that because we need instead to do this. And that isn't getting us further in our discipleship plan, but this will. And we've had to shut down ministries that for some people had been here for a very long time and their hearts were invested in them, but they weren't doing the job of making disciples for us as a congregation. And it's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, to sit down with a group of people and say, we're just not going to do that anymore. But let me tell you just a real quick story as I wrap up. I was called to the carpet. I was called to a meeting of our senior citizens, right? A lot of you have senior groups at your churches, right? This is the group that gets together and they go down to Sight and Sound and all those kinds of places, right? You know, they get together and they go to the movies together or they go out to lunch together. Well, this group met at the Old Country Buffet back room every third Wednesday of the month, right? You're with me? You know the kind of group I'm talking about. This is everybody over 75, 80 years old. God love them. Half of them didn't drive, so half of them had to pick up the group that didn't drive. Right? Which was a really scary thought, to have the 81-year-old picking up the 86-year-old, or vice versa, which was really kind of crazy. So one day the call came into the office to Barb, who schedules everything I do, and her and my wife, and some of you didn't get that. And so, between Barb and my wife, anyway. And the call came in, we want Dave to be at our next meeting. And I thought, oh crap. Here we go. Because you see, the traditional look of this room was a very traditional, hard pulpit, didn't move, it was built in, right? And the organ box was sitting right out here in the front because that's where organists like to be. And You didn't get that one either, did you? Well, some of you did. You just were afraid to laugh. Anyway, okay, we had a lectern over here, and we had the very traditional choir pit back here, and all that kind of stuff. And the plan was we were just going to rip it all out and build a big platform and make room for some of the things we needed to do, right? So that was the plan. So this group said we want Dave to come to our lunch, and so I came to the lunch, and we all had lunch together, and the whole time I've got indigestion, right? I've taken 5 Tums before I got there. I want to start popping Tums while I'm there, and then we get to this point where lunch is over, and the group says, okay, now we want to have a conversation with you, Pastor, because before I was Dave, but now I'm Pastor, right? So I said, okay, well, and so they kind of give me this whole stretch of why are we changing everything? Why do we have to change everything? Because we grew up with this, we built this place, our names are on the little plaques, all that kind of stuff. You know all the stuff, right? I'm not telling you something you don't already know. So I took a deep breath, and I said, I love you guys. And they all smiled, and then they stopped smiling. And I said, and here's what I know. I know that tomorrow, if one of you dies tomorrow, I know where you're going. I've been around long enough to know where you're going tomorrow if you die tomorrow. And I know that when I do your funeral or if you do mine, we know where we're going, right? You know where I'm going, I know where you're going. We're good on that, right? And there were 25 people in the room at that point, and they all went, yep. We know where we're going. We're good, Pastor. If you had to do my funeral tomorrow, I know where I'm going. I said, good. And you know that I've been here long enough that I know your kids and I know your grandkids. And here's my concern. I don't know where your grandkids are going. And so would you consider partnering together with me to figure out how we can make sure that we know, you and me, that we know where your grandkids are going? Because you see, here's the deal. You and I are in. I'm in the kingdom and you're in the kingdom and we're good. But I know your grandkids and I don't know where they're at. And I don't know if we can, I don't want to throw out the generation of your kids who are my age, but many of them walked away from the church. But that generation's now having kids, and I don't know where those kids are at. And if you would be willing to partner with me, I think we can do some things very differently to reach that generation and start making a difference in a life of your grandkids who need to know Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. Would you be willing to do that with me? And some of them went, "Rawr." And some of them said, well, can I sing my hymns? I said, yes, but we're moving that service to 8 a.m. Because you see, your grandkids are not going to get up at 8 a.m. Let's just be honest. Do any of your grandkids get up at 8 a.m.? No. They said, no, our grandkids are out at football on Friday and Saturday night. They get up at about noon. I said, right, so we're going to do the contemporary service at 11. Well, that was the service time I wanted, because my medicine doesn't kick in until about 9:30. I'm like, I get it. But you know what? If your medicine doesn't kick in by 7:30 and you can't get here by 8, I still know where you're going. And if we don't sing your song this morning, I still know where you're going. But I need to know that I'm giving my life for something that makes a bigger difference than just knowing where you're going. I want to make sure I know where your grandkids are going. I want to make sure that I know where the next generation is going. And if you can partner with me on that one, if you can do that, we will change the world. Our median age, our average age of persons here at this church is 40 years old. Because we focus in on that group. Now those seniors still pull me aside once in a while. And they still wag a finger at me once in a while. But here's what I do. 2 Sundays ago, Betty turned 95. So we walked Betty into all 3 of our services and we sang happy birthday to Betty. Because it's just important to celebrate the things that are good, right? Betty's in my back pocket. She's like, whatever you want, Pastor, whatever you want. Because we're working together. All right, so you got some tools. You're getting ready to go to a breakout. I'm done, all right? You've gotten enough from me. Can I just pray for you real quick? All right, let's do that real quick. I'll make it real fast. God, we love you. God, we care about your church, and more so than that, we care about your people. And we're asking, Lord, that over the next couple of hours that we could hear something that would help us engage people like never before. Because our churches need to do that, Lord. Our churches need to touch people's lives in such a way that they can come to know you into an eternal relationship with you that's going to last forever and ever and ever. Lord, help that happen in our lives today. Open our eyes, open our ears, our hearts, our minds today, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Hey, I've said that we've invited different folks who have different plans. Jim is actually my pastor. Jim's been a friend for a lot of years before he was my pastor. Now that I'm not a real pastor anymore and don't go to church to preach every Sunday morning, I often show up, I show up a fair amount at Carlisle United Methodist Church. Carlisle is an interesting church. It is the merger of Grace, First, and Allison United Methodist Churches. Worshiping attendance, and I'm just going to ballpark this, 350 or 60 at Grace, maybe 170 or 80 at Allison, maybe 120 at First. Those churches have now merged into one church. I was probably high on some of those numbers, but that's a ballpark. What I'm saying is they were medium to large churches that decided the best way they could serve Jesus Christ in that town was by merging. That's kind of radical thought, especially when we have churches of 12, 17, and 24 in one town who can't agree on that. Whenever you put something new together, you also have to put together plans that don't exactly look like what the other churches had. And I know that part of what they worked to put together was a new plan that not only was different than everything that had been there before, but really was geared up for a new day of making disciples. Jim, thanks.
Hey, thank you, Dennis. Hey, why don't you do me a favor? If you would, kind of scoot up and sit on the edge of your pew. Just there's only going to be a couple of seconds. Sit up on the edge of your pew, if you would, for me here. And what I want you to do now is just take in a deep breath. Take it in, hold it. Let it out. If nothing else happens during my keynote address, at least I've had you on the edge of your seat and I took your breath away. My job is done for the day as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. I'm not sure why Dennis asked me to speak. Carlisle's been a really, really interesting story, and I'll tell more about that in a workshop, about bringing three large churches together. We had to create something brand new, the brand new vision that did everything, literally everything, differently from either of the previous three churches. But I've been really lucky to have some really dedicated lay folks, some super colleagues to help make all of that happen. So when he asked me to come and share, I thought, well, I don't know what I can share with you. It was really kind of broad in terms of what I wanted, what to talk about with you, and so I can only talk about my experience. I can't tell you anything you haven't already heard. I can't give you some new thought or give you some killer strategy that's going to work in your church. No, most of the stuff I learned the way that most people learn it. You learn more from your mistakes than you do your successes. And that's really how I learn. As a matter of fact, I've been making a lot of mistakes for 30 years. But I've learned a lot along the way. So all I can do is share some of that with you today. If you're going to sacrifice, why not sacrifice for the right stuff? And it truly is about making disciples of Jesus Christ. All I want to share with you today are the 10 things that I've learned from attempting to lead a disciple-making church. And the first thing, the absolute foundational thing that I learned, number one, is that you have to bathe the effort in prayer. That you need to develop a prayer team, prayer warriors, who will consistently pray that your church will be able to be used by God to make disciples. You got prayer warriors in your church. We all do. God has blessed us with that. Might be a a uniform group. I'm a group that you already have that prays in the church. It may be individuals that you are aware of. But one of the things I did was go out to people who I learned were prayer warriors, and I simply asked them, would you please pray that our church can be a disciple-making church? And I just left it at that. And can you pray for that every time you pray? So I have confidence in the 3 years that we've been in existence, we have had now groups of people praying that we would be a disciple-making church. I think that's number one. I think that's the absolute base foundation of one of the things I learned. You can't do this without prayer. Second thing I learned is that you need to be the right leader. Now, I say be the right leader because there's all kinds of leaders. There's all kinds of techniques to leadership. Can you show the next slide, please? Thank you. This is from Dan Goleman's book. If you haven't got the book or haven't read some of his stuff, it's great. I love this particular book because he does a great job of summing up some various leadership styles and giving examples of where they're appropriate and where they're inappropriate. One of the things we can't do in leadership, at least for me, is I have a tendency of a leadership style. We all have a tendency, but I knew I needed to learn how to be proficient at other styles as well when the situation called for it. And when we did the effort of merging 3 churches together, it called for it often to provide different styles of leadership. These are just 6 styles that Daniel Goleman has, but I think they're so good. I've met too many of my colleagues who say, well, this is who I am, this is how I lead, and take it or leave it. Well, when you do that, you've already knocked yourself out of the ballgame. You've already thrown away a tool chest of things that you can use to help make a disciple-making church. Just quickly running through those, the first one he has on the list is authoritative. The kinder thing to say there would be visionary, okay? A visionary approach. The great thing about being a visionary is that it can move people to vision something they can't see for themselves. And throughout all the process of making disciples, we always need to be ready to be that visionary leader, to paint a picture of the future for the congregation and for individuals. But we also need to learn how to be good coaches. Coaches are able to take individuals and look at their skills, gifts, and abilities and see how those would fit into the vision of the entire team, and then encourage and motivate that person to share those gifts in that kind of team so it can be the most effective team possible to meet the vision that you've set for the church. Goleman says the affiliative style, that it helps connect people to each other. This is where you make connections with people and that whole relationship thing. It's real important to be able to relate to people, isn't it? It's real important to be able to talk to folk, to be down home with them, to make them feel comfortable. And an affiliative style of leadership does that. There's a democratic style that he has here. That's a style that values everybody's input and seeks to gain everyone's input. That can be great when you're trying to build consensus moving forward. Now, the last 2 ones on the list are probably the most dangerous 2. And if not used correctly or well, can actually destroy what it is you're trying to do. Pace setters are people who are task-oriented, who work at such a pace and such a high quality that other people around them are either attracted and sucked into that and then are encouraged and motivated to do more than they were doing before, or it can work just the opposite, that it sets such a high standard no one thinks they can reach it anymore. It works really well with already highly motivated groups where you take where they're at and give them more. Give them a higher vision and a higher standard. And the last one up there called commanding. Sometimes that's called coercive. But there are some situations when you're working with people and leading a church where if the crisis is big enough, I believe it's appropriate to stand up and say, folks, this is where we're headed, and this is how we're going to get there. You can use that well, or you can use that incorrectly, but I have found on occasion, that certainly isn't my style, but I've had to use it from time to time, and I've always done so fearfully and in trepidation because I know the consequences that can have when you don't use that well. But just to sum up, one of the things I've learned that you can't just be one kind of leader. You have to become reasonably proficient in all of these styles and learn when to use them and when not to use them. How did I learn when to use them and when not to use them? By my mistakes. By my mistakes along the way. The third thing that I learned in leading trying to put together a disciple-making congregation is that you have to establish a sense of urgency and excitement in order to move people from a state of complacency. You've got to create some kind of urgency within them. Our conference has given you a gift to do this. It's called Matthew 28. That's part of what Matthew 28 does, doesn't it? Comes in and creates with this report some really startling things that can, if communicated properly, wake them up. Let them see that there is a crisis here, there is a sense of urgency, and we ought to do something about that. I learned that if you're not excited about that or feel urgency as a leader, your congregation will never, ever feel that. You've got to be excited about it too, about the future, about the possibilities, about the change that's going to be required to make disciples of Jesus Christ. And you have to continually be excited about it. One of the things I learned that I really needed to do for me is I needed to put together a response to the question, why do I need to be a disciple of Jesus? I needed to put together a response that was 3 sentences long. Couldn't be paragraphs, couldn't be pages. I needed to have a quick retort to why, when people would ask, why do I need to be a disciple of Jesus Christ? And my quick response was, because your life's going to be better as a disciple of Jesus Christ than not. As a matter of fact, take a 60-day challenge. Live 30 days any way you want to live, then change and live 30 days the way Jesus wants you to live. At the end of 60 days, you come back to me and tell me which one gave you more peace, more satisfaction, and more ultimate happiness in your life. I actually had some people do it. They did. And they all came to the conclusion I knew that they would come to. Yeah. Following Jesus. So some people just don't sense a crisis because it's been hidden from them by the administration maybe of the church, by the pastors of the church, by who knows what. And that's done a disservice to us. When we try to go forward and make a discipling church, we have to spend a lot of time convincing the folks that there's a problem because they just don't see or understand there's a problem. Sad thing is, along the way, they've kind of grown accustomed to a very low level of performance and expectation. The fourth thing I learned is that you need to put together a group with enough influence and power to lead the change. That may not be your administrative board or council or whatever administrative structure you have. You know who your power brokers are, and they're the people that have to be in that group. It has to be a group of people that are seen as credible. Because if they're not seen as credible, they will never stand up to the resistance they're going to face. And you're going to face a lot of resistance to this kind of thing. They have to be seen as credible. And here's another gift that comes from Matthew 28. And the gift is Matthew 28, most every prescription I've ever read includes putting together a vision team. That's the group right there. That's where you have that opportunity to put together that group of leaders with enough power and credibility that they can lead change. And then you have to take that group and turn them into a true group. They have to have a unique shared experience that is different from everyone else's. That's the fastest way to make a group, to turn a group into a group, is to have a unique shared experience. If I had all kinds of time today with you, I would have given, every one of you would have received a number, a little slip of paper when you came in. I think there were 171 of you signed up. I would have had numbers 1 to 161 because I would have had 9 number 9s. And what I would have said is, go find a person with a number just like yours. Well, all but 9 of you would be able to find somebody. And then I'd say to that group of 9, now why don't you just sit right up here for today, and I want you to eat lunch together. And after lunch, I want you to spend 5 minutes talking about a whatever question. By the end of the day, they would begin thinking of themselves as a group. They had a unique shared experience that was different from everyone else's. So it's not hard to take these people and turn them into a group. The fifth thing I learned in leading a disciple-making church is you really do have to develop a very clear and very uncomplicated vision that is laser-focused. What do I mean by that? It can't be more than 3 sentences. And it can't be run-on sentences. You know, it's got to be short. It's got to be to the point. It can't be filled with theological jargon. It's got to be very practical. It's just so important to do that. Now, I need to have, I'm going to pick 2 volunteers. Hear that? I'm going to pick 2 volunteers. All right. You, sir, can I have you as a volunteer? I promise I won't embarrass you too much. You'd go on right up to where I'm standing. Can I have you come on up? All right, if you would. Come on up here. Why don't you stand over here where folks can see you, if you would, here. Come on over here, you as well. My name's Jim. Charlie, how do you do? And Tina, how do you do? Tina, this is Charlie. Charlie, that's Tina. All right, I'd like you two to come together and go back to back. Back to back. Okay. Charlie, do you know how to tie a tie?
Yes.
Okay. Tina, do you know how to tie a tie? Well, that's what you're going to do. Here's the tie. These are my holiday ties. This has the Dancing Pilgrims. All right. And this has the Christmas light set. All right. So that's yours. Now, Charlie, what I want you to do is to teach Tina to tie a tie. This shouldn't be hard. and Tina, all we want you to do is everything Charlie tells you, but only what he tells you. All right? So any preconceived knowledge of tying a tie just went out the window. So Charlie, we're all yours. Why don't you go ahead?
Great. Tina, let's put this around our neck.
Now, wait a minute, Tina. How did you know to put it around your neck that way? Oh, okay.
All right. The fat side, pull that down a little lower.
I'll let you hear, Charlie.
All right. You're going to want to cross the longer, or the fat side, over top of the smaller side. Make a cross. Make an X.
How's it going, Tina? You got that?
All right. All right. Take that large piece that you laid over top of the small piece and go underneath. Wrap it behind. All right. I'm sure it looks great. I want to encourage you. Let Now take the working end or the large piece and go up, raise it up, and oh, this is going to be hard. Stick that down through the loop you made, the loop around your neck. You're going to pull it out behind. All right, so you still got your two pieces. You got your working piece is now behind the smaller piece that's out in front. All right, great. We're going to pull that to the right. The working piece, pull that to the right. And you're going to come across to your left-hand side with that piece. Okay. All right. Still got the working piece here. You're going to come up from behind and underneath up through the loop again. Okay. All right. Are you holding that up? Yep. All right, take that working end, and you're going to, the piece you made earlier, how to describe it, sorry. You're going to take that working end and stick it down through that front fold you made earlier. Sorry. If I could see you, I could help you.
All right, why don't you both turn around and face each other?
That was good.
Let's give them a hand for participating. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Charlie, for doing that. It's kind of a silly little exercise, but you kind of get the point, don't you? Sometimes we make things so incredibly difficult when we're trying to communicate something that it's the equivalent of trying to tell somebody who's never tied a tie, with your back to them. It's very, very hard to do. So the mission statement, this uncomplicated vision needs to be laser focused. One of the reasons we do vision statements in the church, and they were real popular in the 80s and in the 90s, and we were all rewriting them, and we put these teams together, and they took 2 years to come up with this magnificent statement, really tightly worded, and it was wonderful. And when it was done, they went, did that. They didn't do anything with them. The only reason you write vision statements is to motivate people. If your vision statement doesn't motivate anybody, move them to action, then you need to rewrite it because it's not working. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. Because from your vision will come your strategy. Hear that? From your vision will come your strategy. Your whole strategy on how to make disciples will come from the vision you have about making disciples. That's how critical, that's how important it is. That's why you need to write it. That's why everyone needs to know it. I say at Carlisle UMC, our vision statement is so simple, any fourth grader can repeat it back to you. I imagine any third grader can probably repeat it back to you. It's that simple. The sixth thing I learned, number 6, is that you have to over-communicate that vision once you decide what it is. And my rule of thumb for over-communicating is by the rule of 25. If you put it one place, you got to put it 24 more places. You got to plaster it everywhere that you can possibly think of. It has to absolutely be on everything you print. It has to absolutely be everywhere in your website, on every page. Has to be in your morning worship folder. Has to be in slides here and there in various ways and in posters. But you just want to inundate the vision. You want that to become so familiar with people that they can repeat it at a moment's notice. You see, people in the church will sacrifice if they know what they're sacrificing for. And the way you get into their heads about what you're about as a church is by communicating and over-communicating it constantly along the way. Now, what I found, one of the things I've learned, and it was very necessary as we were bringing together these three churches and merging them. You know, I used to kid folks and laugh about it. They'd say, how's it going merging three churches together? And I said, well, they're not all mad at me all the time. All right? Two churches, you only tried to make over two churches angry with you, you know, so that you always had one place. But what I learned is I needed to be a non-anxious and constant present. Had to be steady. Had to say, this is the course, this is what we're doing, and this is why we're doing it. Over and over and over again. The key was being non-anxious. I could go home and throw things and yell at trees, but I couldn't do that in the church, you know? Because everything in their world was being uprooted, church world. I needed to be a place that was going to be steady and non-anxious, to give a sense that this will be all right, we'll live through this. The seventh thing I learned is that you need to change, redirect, or abolish structures that undermine the vision. That can be really difficult, but that absolutely has to be done. If the ministry doesn't fit the vision, then you can't do the ministry. It's just that simple, because the resources are too valuable to put into those places. One of the biggest fights or difficulties I've had in almost every church, fights is probably too strong a term. One of the biggest places of resistance has been when I try to change the role of the pastor from being the chaplain to being the leader. I fought it for 30 years. You're fighting it too. If you're trying to lead a disciple-making church, you're fighting it. And the resistance can be really strong and really great at times. But it's absolutely necessary because of the War Room movie, the clip. If you fundamentally believe that's what's at stake, then you have to do it. Absolutely have to do it. Have to get skilled on how to handle conflict. Because if you don't get skilled in how to handle conflict, those people who have bought into the vision and who are willing to sacrifice will quit on you. Let me say that again. They'll quit on you. If you see conflict in the church, you need to go address it now. You can't wait. May not want to, may not feel like it. But the consequences of not doing it are tremendous. The eighth thing I learned was to generate short-term wins. In other words, when a ministry got developed that fit the vision of the church, that made disciples. I remember one time it was, we had 3 more kids join the youth group. Well, we celebrated that in worship. Yes, that's part of the vision. That's part of what we're trying to do. 3 neighborhood kids came and were part of our worship. Our youth group this week. You do all you can to celebrate that. The things that, it's a lot like training animals. You just reward the behavior that you want to see. It's no different in the church in making a disciple-making church. Those things you reward. You just promote, and you publish, and you celebrate. Number 9 is to restructure in a way that encourages more wins. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm not just talking about leadership council, administrative board, council of ministries. I'm not talking about that kind of structure. Yes, you can do some things to help make your church operate more efficiently, and you ought to do those things. But the bigger thing to do, and what I can only speak of my experience right now at Carlisle, so forgive me on that. But what we also administratively restructured was how we allocated programming and money. And we borrowed a business model to do that. If you're in business, the business model, I forget the name of it, one of the sharp guys in our church had that. But he says in business, you have to spend 22% of your money on attracting new business. He says you're only allowed to spend 48% of your money on the business you already have. And 30% of your money needs to be spent on developing the new business that you have. So we took these percentages and we divided them up like this. We said programmatically and with our money, only 48% of our programs and 48% of our money will be spent on ourselves. To help develop disciples, to nurture them, to help them deepen their relationships. 30% of our programs and 30% of our money will be spent on inviting and welcoming and helping others to experience our church. And then 22% of our programs and our money will be spent on engaging the community and inviting people to experience Jesus. And so every ministry, you can't see this, but every ministry, whether it's Grow ministry, whether it's adult discipleship, whether it's the children's ministries, they get one of these charts and they have to put all their ministries in here and how much money they're spending, and they have to come up with these percentages. And it's really forced a lot of our ministries to say, you know, we really do only do stuff for ourselves. We really ought to think about doing something to engage the culture out beyond us. That's what I'm talking about when I'm saying change some of the restructure in a way to encourage more wins from that. Number 10, the 10th thing I learned is to anchor the movement in church culture. You got to really show them how the decisions you made as a church helped you achieve the vision. And you got to tell them that, because if you don't tell them that, they'll think it was because something else. What do I mean by that? Well, if your church grows by 100 people in worship, and if you don't say these are new Christians who've come to experience Jesus with us in our church, or however, be truthful with them, however they get there, they're going to think it was because, gee, it must have been, so-and-so is related to so-and-so, and they brought the family, we got that new service down there, and they just come for the music. That's all they really like. You've got to tell them why they came, because if you don't, they'll think it's another reason, and it's something else. I know I had only 10 things to share with you of what I've learned, but I do have another one, number 11. And the other thing I learned is a disciple-making church is not for everyone, and that includes pastors. And that's okay. That's okay. There are going to be some people who will decide that the change you're asking for is too much. And that's okay. That's okay to do that, because what you get back is going to be a whole lot more. I'm going to close with this exercise, and I need your help to do this, and I hope you'll participate with this. I need you to stand up, and you're probably going to have to move a little bit, and that's okay, because you're going to go right to dinner right after this. But go to a place where at least you're not going to touch anybody with your arms. All right? So we got lots of space here. You can figure out where to do that. If everybody in your pew leaves, you just stay in your pew. That'll work fine, as long as you can't do this. All right? Here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to take your right arm and just put it straight out in front of you, thumb up, fingers pointed straight ahead. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn to the left. And we're going to turn to the left absolutely as far as you can turn, okay? So go ahead and do that. Keep your feet planted straight, okay? So you're twisting at the waist. Twist, 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 twist. Look, sight down your arm. Find a place on the wall. Twist as far as you can. Find the place on the wall where you stopped, or whatever is in front of your fingers. You got that spot? Got that spot? Remember it. Okay, come back. Come back to the center. Loosen up a little bit. Stick up your arm again. Thumb up, finger straight. And I want you to twist around, and I want you to go past that spot. All right? Remember, you went as far as you could the first time. So let's see. Let's turn, twist to the left, keep twisting, 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 twisting. Find that spot. Now go past it. Past that spot. Past that. Keep going if you can. Past that spot. Okay. Bring your arm back down. How many of you went past the spot? You can do more. Last thought. You can do more than you think you can. You really can. Bathe it with prayer. You can make disciples of Jesus Christ. He gave us all the tools we need. That's all I have for you.